So, Peter, thank you for joining me again.
Thank you for the invitation, Mitch.
Peter Hermann is going to be speaking to us about options today. And Peter, if you wanted to just refresh people with what exactly you do before we actually get into speaking about options in commercial real estate.
Sure. As I said before, I'm actually an Australian credit licence holder, which means it licenses me to do things like mortgage broking, also to access private lenders and things like that. So that's my area of expertise, where I'm licensed to give advice. I'm not really going to give anybody any advice about options or contracts or things like that. That fits into the category. I've seen other people do this and it worked for them, so you should go and check it out.
Yes.
However, as they say with sport, the spectators see 90% of the play, and I've been doing this now for nearly 20 years, so you do pick up a lot of things along the way, but everything I say, I give you the disclaimer, go and do your due diligence with all your legal, financial and other professionals, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to options, I'll say something in a minute, sometimes it pays to get a second opinion.
I think it always pays to get a second opinion, and I think it always pays off to do your due diligence.
Mm.
And if somebody's doing your due diligence for you, double check it.
Yeah.
You know, so everything that we're talking about over here is general conversation. This is not an advice platform. It literally is an opportunity to hear about what other people are doing and how they're doing it.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
And options are a bit like delayed settlements, in the sense that a lot of people never think to have a delayed settlement, and they think, oh, if I asked I wouldn't get it. Well, maybe you won't, but you'd be surprised how often people will give a delayed settlement. And options are the same. I've known people who sent out hundreds of letters about options and haven't got a single taker, because all they've done is they've sent out letters and haven't followed through.
Yeah.
It's never got to that point where they've actually had a conversation and not just explained what they want to do, but more particularly actually understood the vendor or the other person where they're coming from.
So just explain the difference between options versus delayed settlement. Let's just nut down a little bit on an option, and how can our listeners be doing options in commercial real estate?
Okay, and the two things are similar in some ways, different in others, but you've always got to remember what's your primary objective in signing either a long-term contract or an option. The purpose is you want to take the property off the market effectively, because if it's left on the market, you've got competition, and we all know that competition forces the price up.
Yeah.
You make your money when you buy it, not when you sell it, so you want to buy it, if not at the best price, under the most favourable terms and conditions. And so, as I said last time, the delayed settlement gives the vendor certainty. They know it's going to happen, so they're willing to trade off either time, or maybe there's some other consideration given to them. But the purpose of the option is the same thing. You want to take the property off the market while you do your due diligence. You don't want to say to them, oh look, I'll sign a contract in a month's time, I want to go and do this. But in the meantime, somebody else has come in and straight away offered them 80 grand more and forced you out of the market.
So effectively, if you're putting an option on a property, nobody else can come in and make a sale on that property.
No, and
why would your vendor want to do that? I mean, the vendor wants to sell, and they want to sell for the highest price. So why would they want an option?
Well, sometimes they want to sell at the highest price, but they don't want to sell now. You see it quite often when people buy, say, houses on 20 or 30,000 square metres of land for a subdivision, and the vendor wants to sell, but they don't want to sell now. They know they're going to be retiring in 18 months' time, and they want to relocate then, and they want money then, but they want to use the next 18 months to restructure their life. And similar thing commercially. Somebody might be selling a property, commercial property, to relocate somewhere else, but they want to perhaps rent in the next place, or they want to build their business up there. Any one of a dozen reasons. So, and this is where you've got to find out what does your vendor really want, because sometimes they don't want what you think they want, and sometimes they actually want something, as you said last time, something quite intangible or emotional, even an architrave or something else that has all this sentimental value attached to it.
Well, in actual fact, we've just had a situation where we've got, and there are a couple that I can think of, where we have vendors that are expanding their businesses and moving on to larger premise, but the building that they're trying to sell is maybe 50% tenanted, because they were occupying maybe 50% of the building and they've let out 50%, and they're prepared to do a lease back for a period of time for 6 months, just to give the incoming vendor certainty of lease until they can lease it out. So in actual fact, in that sort of situation, we could offer that kind of vendor an option.
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
And what would the advantage to the vendor be?
Look, it could be something as apparently insignificant as that, one of the tenants or prospective tenants is his best mate and he doesn't want to get his best mate offside, or he's already promised somebody something, or I don't know, there's all these sorts of intangible reasons, but the reasons are as varied as the people you deal with, and you've got to find out what's really driving them. But so often we don't find out because we just never ask the question.
True. Well, yes, we don't think of asking the question, and again, in this case in point, because the vendor's often offering to do a lease back, which often is an optimum, because in that case that you're going to have to find another lease. Whereas I'm just thinking, if you put an option on it, it's a win-win situation.
Correct. And it depends too who you're selling to.
Yeah.
If you're selling to another owner-occupier, the 50% of tenants there are a problem, and you don't want to certainly tenant the other party who wants to occupy it. If you're selling it to an investor, if you can actually tenant the whole thing before you sell it to an investor, generally speaking, they'd much prefer to buy something that's 100% occupancy than something that's only 50% occupancy.
Absolutely. As an investor, however, if you wanted to add value and maybe get a chunk out of that, you could add value by buying that or purchasing that property with an option on it, and you yourself are finding the tenant to re-tenant at a higher rate or a better rate. Exactly.
And to get back to what is the basic principle underneath an option, it actually means that you have options. But every transaction or every relationship, it has options on the one hand and it has obligations on the other.
Right.
Now, in your transaction, where do you want the obligations to be? Do you want them on you, or do you want them on the other person?
Obviously on the other person. You want to have the options with as few obligations as possible. Yeah. So how do you structure that? How would you structure that? And I'm thinking particularly in a commercial kind of situation. What would the best way be of structuring something like that? So it's a win-win. It's going to be a win-win situation.
Yeah. And I mean, how an option works, and here's where I said before, get a second opinion. And the speaker at our meetup the other night said that he's done a lot of options, and the lawyer said, "Oh, you've got to put down a 5% deposit." He said, "No, I don't." He's put down literally 5 cents. Small amount. Money has to change hands.
Yes.
But you go to the wrong lawyer, and he's got fixed his mind 5 or 10% or something like that. That's only the limit of his experience, which is why you get a second opinion. But in an option contract, your only obligation is that you put up whatever sort of money you put up front. You have to do your due diligence, but at the end of the option term, you decide whether you're going to take it up or not. And if you decide not to take it up, you've tied up, say, $1,000 to be able to do some due diligence for 3 months or something like that. So your obligations are minimal. And if in the meantime, let's say you've taken an option out on it for $650, which might be a fair market price, and all of a sudden 3 weeks later somebody comes along and wants to throw $750, too bad, can't do it, because all the obligations on the vendor to sell it to you if you exercise your option.
Okay, so if you exercise your option, you can basically take that sale at $750. I mean, you're exercising your option and purchasing it at $650, but once you've purchased, you can unsell it at $750.
Correct, you can sell the option, and and perhaps if you should go and chase the guy who's offered $750 because you might pick up after stamp duty that you might pick up 60 or 70 grand without having even had to pick up a single paintbrush.
Absolutely, and without having to pay agents' fees, that's a sale in point.
I mean, that is hypothetical, and it's rare, but they do come along. And I think sometimes, if you're renovating and flipping, people think reno, flip it. Hang on, a small transaction where in a matter of 3 or 4 weeks, where you can pick up $50,000 or $60,000 and turn it over very quickly. If you can do half a dozen of those a year, you really are laughing, aren't you?
Absolutely. So if you're prepared to put the hard yards in and do that, you can, and be smart about the way that you're working your money. So really, an option is it's almost like a get out of jail card with a little bit of cash attached in the back of your pocket. I mean, if you're working it smartly.
Yeah. Either that or as we were talking about earlier, it's like a ticket to an event. The ticket gives you the option to go to the event. You don't have to go to the event. Okay, maybe you're stuck with the ticket. Maybe you can sell the ticket for more. Maybe you just got to lose it altogether.
Yeah.
But you've got the opportunity to do something where, when it comes to crunch time, it's up to you to whether you decide you want to do it or not.
Okay. Now, the obvious question is, why would a vendor go ahead with an option on their property? And we have kind of covered this in previous delayed settlements. I mean, why do you think? Why would a vendor go ahead with putting an option down?
The two most common reasons are, and they both really come down to certainty, but quite often the vendor doesn't want to sell now, but he'd like to know he's going to sell in the future. The other thing too is, on a commercial property, and certainly when you're looking at buying property to do subdivisions and developments, you can be looking at quite a long option term, 12 or 18 months. Now, often you'll offer the vendor a bit more than you would get at market price.
Bang!
Yeah, but sometimes you might only be offering him market price, but
Yes.
over 12 or 18 months, don't forget markets can go down.
Yes.
If he's worried that he might not get this for it in 18 months' time, he might rather take the certainty of your option now, and he hasn't got to worry about all the other stuff that goes with it. So he'd rather know for certain in 18 months' time, I'm going to sell it for this. All of a sudden, the bottom won't have fallen out of the market, and etc., etc. But you've got the option. You can cause the bottom to fall out of that deal very quickly just by walking away from it. But I'm assuming that most people with options don't just, or some people do run around and just put options on everything and make up their mind later. But hopefully there's usually a bit more integrity involved with that, where people are actually doing genuine due diligence.
Yes, and I think running around putting options on everything, I don't think is the optimum way to actually build up a business realistically. But the thing that I was most interested in conversation when we were talking was the option of putting options on property in order to do the renovations, to do the flips, and to do the basically uplift of the property and sell for more.
Absolutely, because look, you can put anything in the option contract that you and the vendor both agree to. You could put in the option contract that before you can exercise your option, the whole building must be painted pink or something.
Whatever it is.
But some of the things you can put in an option which people often don't think of is, as with a delayed settlement, you can move in under license. So part of the option contract can be that you can actually move in and start doing your renovating work. People tend to use options for, I want to get a DA or council approval if it's a development site. But to actually be able to move in, to actually start your renovating work, and also you can include in the option that you can, it's usually given you can on-sell the option, but the other thing too is you can put in the option that you want to be able to tenant the building as well, so that you can actually enter into commercial leases. Now, at that point, you want to make very, very certain you exercise your option at the end, or it's going to be an almighty contractual mess for somebody to sort out.
Absolutely.
But the thing to remember in the option is you're doing two things. You're buying yourself time, and you're also buying yourself more time in the sense you're delaying the point where you have to find your own money.
And that's, I think that's the big thing.
Mm.
The beauty about doing an option is if you don't have that cash flow right now, but you know that cash flow is coming in maybe a month's time or 3 months' time, and you found the perfect deal, is offer the option on it. You know, give yourself that gap. Worst case scenario, the vendor says no. You know, so at least you're giving that. You have that option open. I wanted to ask you another technical question. Can you get an extension on an option? So in other words, if you have an option for 6 months and your renovation is not finished in 6 months, can you get an extension on the option for another 3 months?
If you write it into the contract, yes.
Okay, so you're going to pre-write that.
Yeah, and look, a really good option contract, it can cost literally a few $1,000s to get it drawn up.
Yeah.
My friend who's done a lot of options, he spent a lot of money, and when he spoke to our meetup, he wouldn't show us his contract. He said, no, I spent thousands of dollars getting this. But you could certainly put in there a clause, for example, that after, say, 12 months, that subject to the agreement of both parties, that this option will be extended. But you're losing control then, because it's subject to their agreement. But you might put in there that subject to a payment of an additional $10,000, this option will be increased. So that's getting you to put more skin in the game. But at the end of 12 months, you can say, right, I'll pay another $10,000, and they've got to extend it for whatever the extension period is under the option. And I've seen people do that, because to pay $10,000 every 3 months or something is much cheaper than paying interest on $1 million loan, or doing a whole range of other things, or tying up capital in it. So
absolutely, it certainly is. I'm just trying to think of any other scenarios that we could use in commercial for options, and the only thing that's coming to mind would be if you don't have the deposit right now, or you don't have the cash right now. You also mentioned to on-sell an option, which is a little bit of an idea if you don't have that cash flow right now and you do manage to put an option on a property. Peter mentioned how you can actually make cash out of an option. Do you want to tell them about that one?
Sure, I don't. The actual mechanics of it are outside my area of expertise, and what I'm licensed to advise on, but an option is an option, and you can put in the make sure it's in the contract that you can actually on-sell the option to somebody else. And
again, it's like selling a ticket for a football game. You're buying it for $80 and you're selling it for $100.
Correct. And one thing is, if it's an option and you sell it before the option is exercised, so there's the contract of sale is not between you and the purchaser, but between the original vendor and the purchaser. That's one area where you do get out of paying stamp duty. The incoming purchaser will have to pay it. Somebody always pays that in the end, at least once.
Uncle Sam always gets his chunk.
Yes. Yes, and over here they do get their pound of flesh and their pint of blood.
Oh yes, don't even go there.
Yes, okay, enough about governments and taxation. But,
so that would be that would be a strategy. If somebody wants to get their hands dirty to do the renovations, they can put the option down, possibly on-sell that option for an additional 20 grand and use that 20 grand to renovate the building, to tenant it, and then to on-sell that building for a far higher price tenanted. So that would be primarily for vacant properties or semi-tenanted properties.
Correct. And I mean, this is very much a hypothetical situation, but people have done it. And that is that, look, you can go around and put options on some properties. You don't have the funds to complete. Yeah, you've only put $1,000 down. You really can't complete, and you don't even have the money to renovate. So you madly run around seeing if you can on-sell it. But if you had a dozen of those going, and you put $1,000 down on each of them, and 6 of them fell over and 2 didn't complete, but you had 4 more and you made $20,000 each out of them. Okay, it's not a lot of money, but it's a lot of money for almost no outlay whatsoever.
Yeah.
And you're honing your skills in the meantime now.
That's a bit of a sneaky skill.
Well, it's not actually sneaky. I mean, people sign the option document.
Yeah.
Everybody's completely upfront. But look, if I sign an option on a $750,000 property, and for whatever reason, I've got the option price at $650, and you turn up and I sell it to you for $680, which is still $70,000 below market price. Have I done you a bad turn?
No, it's and I really like that, because I'm always looking for strategies that is win-win-win situation where everybody wins. You know, there's got to be a solution for everybody that's in the pie.
Yeah.
So long as it is a win-win situation, then it's absolutely doable, and I think all right to do. Okay. Is there anything else about options that we could be sharing with our audience today?
The only thing I'd say is that think very, very carefully about what you put in the option contract, because once it's in there, unless you've got a contingency clause, you are locked in. It's no good. You put your money down, and 3 or 4 weeks down the track, you decide, oh, I should have put that in. But in the meantime, somebody else has come along and offered the vendor more money, and he said, well, I can't, etc., because I've got an option. But here you are, you're locked into something that's not quite right, and when it comes to the conditions in an option contract that you're putting in, better to go more rather than less, because you want to actually tie things up as much as possible. You want to also give yourself the maximum number of out clauses. And the same thing too when you're doing a contract of sale, you put as many conditions in that both favour you and give you the option of pulling out as well. And so just to revert back to contract of sale, and you might have 28 days or something for due diligence and finance and other things like that. I mean, you put as many conditions in there as you can that you want to make the contract subject to, because if you dig up something in your due diligence that may even be slightly unrelated, you want to have something where you can pull the trigger on the contract and walk away and not be obligated, and options are exactly the same. You want to make sure you cover every possible contingency, and it could be worthwhile putting a clause in that the option's only for 6 months, but you want the automatic right to extend subject to an extra payment.
Okay, so that would basically cover you in the event of not being able to find a tenant or something else.
Finance, or the
renovation,
Yeah.
whatever. We were talking earlier about how to handle